So today we are exploring one of the greatest conversion stories in the Bible. And the word conversion might be a bit scary, as it has deep roots with the evangelical church and highly associated with colonialism. However, let me assure you, this is not a bad word. And I'm sure most of you have conversion stories of your own. Why are you a Christian? Was it someone or something that brought you to church? Was it more subtle, like you were raised in a church and you therefore feel called to continue this practice? Were you raised in a church and left and came back again because you felt a nudge like you should return? All of these can be considered conversions. I myself don't really have an amazing conversion story. As most of you know, I was raised in a conservative Lutheran church, and church has always been a part of my life. I grew up in it. I left, and I continued after a period of time to be part of the church. So one question I get asked, seems weekly right now, when people find out I'm a minister is, why did you choose that path, that career? And I often just smile and I say, because of God. But the truth is, I didn't choose the path at all. God chose me for this path. And it was not some great calling like we just heard the reading say. Perhaps it was more of a gentle nudge that turned into a gentle shove after I continually denied it. And if I look back, and it might have started when I was a teenager, when I was in the Lutheran church, and I so desperately wanted to serve the church that there was not really room for me. And I realized there was a program in the US called a deaconess, which basically was the equivalent to becoming a youth and child minister in the Lutheran church. But as I explored this calling more and talked to my pastor, he told me he felt that I was not listening to God at all. I was listening to perhaps the devil, because women had no place in the church. I felt a bit angry and then disappointed, and I left that church. So it really wasn't until I started working at Rosh United Church as a outreach worker that I felt another call to ministry. And it kind of looked like this. I woke up one morning thinking, I want to be a minister. And then a voice in my head said, don't be stupid. You can't go back to school for 4 years. You're not smart enough. Just forget about it. So I pushed that thought far out of my brain. Then one day out of the blue, I was talking to Debbie Stockdale, and I don't even know the words came out of my mouth. I have no idea how. And they said, I think I want to be a minister. And I went, I don't know why I said that. And she kind of laughed and said, we'll explore that later then. I was terrified of going back to school. I was terrified of this calling. And I kept on pushing the thought out of my head, pushing it out of my head. Then one night I woke up in the middle of the night and my thoughts were consumed with this calling. And I think I literally said, no thanks, God, not now. And I tried to go back to sleep. And that week, I didn't sleep much. something kept waking me up, a small whisper perhaps. You are called to be a minister. And finally, after about 5 days of not sleeping, I woke up and I said, fine, God, I'll explore it. And I fell back asleep and I slept well. So it wasn't really dramatic. It was subtle. And what I have found out since then is when I do not take the time to listen to God during the day, God will wake me up in the middle of the night every time. So although dramatically different and way more dramatic than how Saul was called to ministry, both of our experiences started out refusing to listen to God. For me, I lost a few nights' sleep, but for Saul, God had to basically beat him over the head to wake up and listen. I'd probably advise you to listen to God's whisper. I'm sure it's a lot easier than the way that Saul was converted. So let me start with the background of Saul and we'll explore why this was the most important conversion in all history of the Christian church. So Saul was born in Tarsus, which was an affluent and diverse community that valued education. And Saul was born a Roman citizen. So at some point, Saul moved to Jerusalem and studied under Gamaliel, which was a Pharisee and an esteemed rabbi. And Saul also participated in tent making apprenticeship at some point before his conversion. We know that Saul had a deep faith and lived his life according to Judaism with great passion and devotion. It was his deep beliefs in God that led him to believe that Jesus was an imposter, a liar. Saul did not believe the good news that Jesus had been the long-awaited Messiah, and therefore he viewed Christians as deceitful and a threat to Judaism. And Saul's rejections of Jesus as a Messiah led him to believe that he needed to persecute the followers of Jesus to stop the spread of the gospel. So he really dedicated his days to terrorizing Jesus' followers with a hope of prohibiting what he believed to be a false message. And we know that Saul was present when St. Stephen was wrongly accused of offensive words against God and Moses, and he was stoned to death. Saul was present at that point in time. So Saul was on his way to prison and persecute more Christians when he encountered Jesus. A light from the sky flashed around Saul and he fell to the ground. He heard a voice crying out, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" And Saul seemed to have thought that the individual was someone he had arrested or was about to arrest, was accosting him and confronting him. But as we all know, it was someone different. It was Jesus. And Jesus said, "I am Jesus whom you are persecuting." And this revelation was a shock to Saul. Jesus, the one whom the Romans executed in shame and disgrace? How could Saul be persecuting him if he was dead? Furthermore, how could he be addressing Saul if he was dead? So Jesus told Saul to go to the city and get instructions there. When he rose and went to open his eyes, he could see nothing. He was led to the city by the men he was traveling with, and he remained unable to see for 3 days. The man in the city named Aeneas, a disciple of the Lord, was told by the Lord to go and find Saul. Now Aeneas was familiar with Saul by reputation He said, Lord, I have heard from many sources about this man, what evil things he has done to your Holy One in Jerusalem. And here he has authority from the chief priest to imprison all who call upon your name. The response that Ananias received is remarkable, even shocking. And knowing what we know now, a deeply important statement. Go, for this man is a chosen instrument of mine to carry my name before the Gentiles, kings, and the Israelites, and I will show him what he will have to suffer for in my name. Here we are told of the mouth of the Lord that Paul is to carry the word of God to all people, to the Gentiles as well as Israelites, Paul's own people, kings as well as common folks. And we already know that this man is to be important, that his role is to be unparalleled, and he will yield great things in service of God. So Ananias came to Saul and told him he had been sent to the Lord. Saul, my brother, the Lord has sent me, Jesus, who appeared to you on the way which you came, that you may regain your sight and be filled with the Holy Spirit. And Saul regained his sight, was baptized, and immediately moved on to preach Jesus in the synagogues of Damascus. And we all know that Saul's name was changed to Paul, and the conversion of St. Paul is so important for us today for two reasons. First, this man could be known as apostle to Gentiles, the man who would do more than perhaps anyone else to spread the gospel of Jesus far and wide, and to fight the unconventional doctrine and other problems that arise in the church he established. St. Paul is largely responsible for spreading Christianity beyond the Jewish circles. You see, it was easy for the Jews who witnessed Jesus' death and resurrection to believe he was the true Messiah. That word, we recall, spread like wildfire on that Easter morning and the weeks to follow. However, it meant very little to the Gentiles, the non-Jews, and Paul was the first apostle that made it his mission to evangelize to these Gentiles. He broke down the old laws and he opened Christianity up for everyone. So secondly, St. Paul helped to show us what conversion really means. So conversion actually does not mean changing your religion. It does not mean I'm an atheist and I become a Christian. Paul's conversion didn't only consist of acceptance of Jesus as Messiah, but a change of heart. Paul had essentially made a career out of persecuting Christians for their faith. After his experience on the road to Damascus, Paul recognized the foolishness of his ways and had a dramatic change of heart. And this is what conversion is, a change of heart. And conversion is not only meant for non-Christians. Conversion is not meant for those who have led dramatically sinful lives. Conversion is reorientation of our wills towards God, a change of heart in which we seek what God wills us and we strive to do what God is calling us to do. So yes, my conversion was a call to ministry, and your conversion probably looks a lot different. And conversion is not something that happens to us just once. It's an ongoing change of heart, a continually reorientation of ourselves in order to align with our wills with God. and our wills are not perfectly aligned with God's. This is something we must work towards. So I feel strongly that I was called to serve Parkdale, and how I determined this was through a lot of prayer and listening to where God wanted me to be. And I think the search committee will probably tell you something similar. So let me go back to what I said at the beginning of my sermon. The word conversion might be a bit scary. It has deep roots in the evangelical church, and it's highly associated with colonization. However, let me assure you, it's not a bad word. You see, I think the evangelical church actually has this right. They continually, over and over again, celebrate conversions. They're not afraid to talk about them. They're proud to tell their stories over and over again. So over the next few weeks, I urge you to think of your own conversion stories. And I ask them to share them with each other, with your friends. This is a way of encouraging others to strive what God is calling us to do. Amen. Please rise and sing with me as you're able. Here I am, Lord.